Good morning. Today we will be looking at something a little bit more philosophical, and that is we are going to look at the approaches that can be used when we try to study tourism, hospitality, or event research. Okay, when we talk about any research, there are two theoretical paradigms. Paradigms here means a set of belief by the that the researcher hold in conducting the research. Okay, so when we talk about theoretical paradigms of these sets of beliefs, there are two categories or two types of paradigms that can be adopted, either positivism or interpretivism. These are the two paradigms that can lead the researcher to know exactly the methodology to be adopted and the approach that they should use in order to do the research. Okay, because from this, the investigation will take either inductive approach or deductive reasoning approach. Okay, and so we will look at this in the next few slides, along with some issues about the ethics of tourism research. So at the end of this particular set of slides, which by the way, if you find a little bit unclear, you can also refer to the original slides, which I will be posting either on Facebook or the online learning platform. Okay, so for this particular set of slides, the learning outcomes which we hope you will get would be your ability to explain the differences between positivist and interpretive paradigm, and then also your ability to explain two logical methods in social scientific theory and research, as well as your ability to explain the ethical issues in research related to our industry. When we talk about our industry, we already know that tourism, hospitality, and event research relates to people. Okay, and so we will be in the context of social science, and tourism itself can be either multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary or interdisciplinary, because tourism is not like accounting, which is a discipline on its own that can stand on its own. When we deal about people, when we try to understand about our industry, we have to sometimes look at multiple discipline. For example, the issue of sustainable tourism itself. Okay, we cannot understand how to study sustainable tourism without some understanding from the economic perspective. Also, we need to explore the environmental perspective and the social perspective, because if you remember, these are the three pillars of sustainable tourism or sustainable development issue. So some of the topics that we could be exploring could also be in the context of cross-disciplinaries, because some issues or some theories or concepts that we'll be looking at belongs to more than one discipline. So this is what we call cross-disciplinary. For example, if we want to study how to market homestay business, clearly we have to look at this from two dimensions: the perspective of marketing and the perspective of business, tourism business, which is homestay business. So that in that sense, we will be crossing discipline in order to do this particular topic. Or we could also be exploring or researching on something that could be interdisciplinary. Yeah, interdisciplinary refers to subfields of research which do not fit neatly into any particular discipline. For example, if we want to learn about Industrial Revolution 4.0, where does this fit in? Okay, no particular discipline. So that's why we have to do interdisciplinary approach when we look at the issue of IR 4.0. So clearly tourism, even when we look at hospitality and event, is a subject that cross the boundaries of many disciplines. Okay, so we have to be mindful of this and carefully look at the topic that we're trying to do in order to see what are some of the disciplines or dimensions that we have to consider or incorporate in order to do the research properly. According to Graben and Jafari, no single discipline alone can accommodate, treat, or understand tourism. By tourism here, it means also including hospitality and event. It can be studied only if disciplinary boundaries are crossed and if multidisciplinary perspectives are sought and formed. Okay, so if you remember, Jafar Jafari is like the father of tourism. So this is what he has proposed with his fellow author Graben. So going back to the paradigms of a research, according to Gilba 1990, there are two paradigms that we must be mindful of, which is positivism and interpretivism. And when we look at each of these paradigms, we will look at it from the ontology perspective. Ontology means the reality of it, the nature of it. From the epistemology perspective, which means we are looking into the relationship between the researcher and what is being researched. And from the methodology perspective, you know what method is, which is the set of guidelines or approach of conducting the research. Okay. So for positivism, positive paradigm normally reflect quantitative research. So you just remember that positivism equals quantitative. Okay, so from ontological basis, it is being organized by universal laws and truths. Human being is predictable, the behavior is predictable, can be shaped and controlled, and from that we can deduce. We can use deductive approach to research. From epistemological basis, the value of having this set of belief, the positivism set of belief, is objective. It is not subjective. And so that's why we do it quantitatively, because when we measure something quantitative, the result should be objective, not subjective. Okay, whatever that we see, that is the result, not something that the researcher can interpret and conclude. Okay, so according to this paradigm, the methodological basis will be controlled experiments and repeatable procedures, or quantitative. These are just type of research that we can use positivism paradigm. So actually, when we look at the amount of research that has been done out there, the empirical research are mostly taking positivism approach, using positivism paradigm, because most of the tourism, hospitality, and event research out there are quantitative based. Okay. The opposite of that, the opposite of positivism, will be interpretivism. When you hear the word interpretivism, you need to associate this with qualitative research. Okay, qualitative approach, because this set of belief refer to this kind of methodology. Okay, where we will be using interviews, observation, case studies, and other qualitative methodology in order to get the understanding on what we are studying. So in this paradigm, the relationship between the researcher and what is being researched is often subjective. Subjective means the outcome or the data is subject to the interpretation of the researcher himself or herself. Okay, and the ontology would be of this paradigm is that the world is multiple realities, not just one truth. There are many possibility or many truths, and so we need to use an inductive approach to do research. These are some possible areas of research that we can conduct using qualitative approach or using interpretive paradigm. Deduction and induction are the ways that we make our conclusion when we do our research. Okay, so when we do something that is quantitative, we use what is called deduction approach to do our conclusion, because we arrive at our conclusion by interpreting the meaning of the results that we have analyzed. Okay, so usually deduction is based on research that starts with a theoretical framework and then followed by some kind for hypothesis formulation, and then logically deducting or concluding, deducing or concluding the result of the study. Okay, so again, deduction equals quantitative approach, quantitative research. Okay, so for example, of a deduction is the following: all baby boomers love cruise tourism. That is the fact that we know for our research. And then if John is a baby boomer, then we can conclude that he also loves cruise tourism, and that's the conclusion. Okay, so the approach that we take when we do a deduction process in a research is we look at general and then we make specific conclusion from it. The opposite of deduction will be induction. Remember, deduction was quantitative, induction will be qualitative. Okay, because when we use induction, we are actually looking at a process, observing something, a certain phenomena, and then making proposition based on what we have observed. So basically that is a qualitative approach. Okay, so the logical thinking we use there when we do an induction process in the research is to observe a specific and making general conclusion from that using qualitative approach, where we will be interviewing or observing or doing case studies or whatever in order to generate the findings that for us to induce. And very important to remember is that the whole thing is a circular process. That means there is no step A, step B, step C. We have to keep on thinking and reflecting in order to come up with a conclusion. Okay. If you remember, in our previous class, we have looked at the type of research as scientific or social science. So I don't think I need to explain this anymore, apart from you to remember that scientific research is usually science-based with logical rules and control mechanism and using systematic examination of evidence. Whereas when we talk about social science, it's usually more subjective because it deals with people and their social behavior, which can be unpredictable or less predictable. So both are different ways of doing research. Yeah? When we do the scientific research, we need to make sure that they are objective and replicable. Whereas when it is a social science research, this is difficult to do. It is difficult to replicate the research, yeah? And it is difficult to control because things keep changing. So there are many limitations of this. And in order to overcome, we have to have all the skills that is required in order to do the research. We have to have writing skills. We have to know the methodology that we should use in order to achieve the data that we need. We have to have computer access and how to use that computer, because if you remember, the analysis would be using specific softwares. For example, the quantitative data may need software such as SPSS in order to be analyzed, whereas qualitative data may need software such as NVivo in order to be analyzed. Okay, so if we have to have access to the software as well as the knowledge to use the software. Okay, and then we also have to manage our time. Okay, we have to also foresee any possible problems that may arise and be able to anticipate that and try to resolve it. And we also have to have interpersonal skills, which means the ability for us to communicate with our either with our research members or with authority that fund the research, or with our peers when we go and present our findings at the national or international forum. Okay, so now that we have known the approach and what we need to do in order to get ready for research, we also have to be more mindful about the ethics of tourism, hospitality, and event research. Okay, so when we do research on people, we have to observe the fact that their participation is fully voluntary. That means we cannot force them to participate with us if they don't want to. That they give us informed consent. That means they really specifically say they agree to participate, rather than we assume that they want to participate. We give them the right to refuse any questions that they may feel objectionable or they don't want to answer. We give them the right to withdraw from the research if they feel uncomfortable, and we give them the right not to be deceived by any aspect of the research. That means they should not feel like they have been used or victimized at the end of the research when we have already analyzed our findings and come up with our conclusions. The participants also should not be harmed at any stage of the research. Either the beginning, when we try to approach them, don't approach them too aggressively and make them be scared. When they are participating, don't force them to answer in a certain way, for example. And when we do the analysis and the findings, we should be mindful about their confidentiality and their anonymity. Anonymity means the right not to be identified, not for people not to be able to identify, yes, they are the one who participated and gave information, because to some people it could be very inconvenient for them. It could affect their lifestyle or livelihood in a harmful way. So the researcher, that means us who are doing the research, have to make sure that we protect our participants from any intrusion at any stage in the research. We should not allow them to feel any physical harm or psychological harm or legal harm or anything. Okay, they should be again voluntary, and they should be assured of their anonymity or confidentiality. And also, they should not feel that they have been deceived into participating. So right from the beginning, we must observe these ethical responsibilities as a good researcher. Another reason why we need to be ethical when we conduct research is also because we have to take care of the reputation of the scientific community itself. Because if we start doing something that is harmful for our participant, maybe future researcher would have difficulty to access them or to ask them information or to replicate our study, because they have had such a terrible experience during our research. So we have to take care of the reputation of us, the scientific community. Okay, and then we also need to make sure that the research findings are derived in morally, and then disseminated also professionally and responsibly. That's all there is for this chapter. I will give you more materials later on, and you are free to ask me any question in our Facebook discussion later on. Bye.